Hi, this is Sean Murphy of SK Murphy. I'm the MC for today's Lean Culture webinar on AI in Action, practical tips for AI-enabled automation. We're fortunate today to have Alex Panait, CEO of Mission Automate, offering a briefing on practical applications of AI tools for entrepreneurs. Mission Automate is a one-stop shop for machine learning and artificial intelligence custom software development. If you have questions during the part of the talk, please type them into the chat and I'll ask them. Alex has also reserved some time at the end to take free-form questions. Alex?
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. This is AI in Action, Practical Automation. The focus of my work at Mission Automate is to lead teams of developers towards creating products with an AI component for our clients. So there's a lot to cover, but the main message of this presentation is don't panic, AI is here to help. So we specialize in custom AI development. We work both with enterprise and small to medium businesses. This year, we've started releasing our own AI-powered products. We've completed more than 100 successful projects in 14 countries worldwide. We have a lot of areas of expertise, but some of the main ones are natural language processing, so everything that has to do with text generation or summarization, and computer vision, so image processing. This is the agenda for today. We're going to briefly discuss AI use cases at a high level, and then we're going to get into LLMs, large language models, which were spearheaded by ChatGPT a couple of years ago and have transformed the way that AI is used both by users and by companies to create products. We're going to look at some of the AI tools that are available right now, and then we're going to look at some examples, specifically examples with prompt engineering, and we'll get more into what that means as well. We're going to look at some cautionary tales, specifically around hallucinations, which is something that commonly occurs in AI models. And we're going to touch on a few of the thought leaders in this space that have unique opinions and insights into how AI is being used. And finally, we're going to take some time for questions and answers. Okay, so the foundational reason for this talk is that AI has transformed all aspects of our lives. Effectively, how we work, for sure, but also how we shop, how we view content, how we play, how we interact with other people, how we live all together. And it's natural when such a big transformation occurs to be apprehensive about what it implies. Indeed, AI has had some negative impact already. That doesn't mean it doesn't have positive. I just want to acknowledge the fact that you can easily find stories about how AI has had a negative impact on some situation or on the job market. And the point of this talk is to illustrate at a high level how AI is being used and how you can use it, whether just as tools to enhance your own work, but also as potential components to include in your own products that you would create. So we're going to start with some major AI use cases. Possibly one of the first ones and where AI got a lot of attention was vision. So here we're talking about image classification. Image classification is a task where you give an AI model an image and you ask it, what type of image is this? Like you give it an image of an animal and you say, is this a dog or a cat? Object detection is related to image classification in that you show the AI an image and you ask it to detect all of the objects in the image: a car, a person, a house, a cat. Facial recognition is similar to the previous two, but it specifically refers to recognizing faces and discriminating between different faces. And finally, there's optical character recognition, and I have a small clip here that I'm going to play. OCR has been around for a while, and AI has helped helped it progress by a lot. In this video, you can see a specialized device that is used to read text from a page. And what it does is it reads the images themselves and then converts it to text here, as you can see here in this on this screen. So as an example, my team has developed an application that's used to digitize sewing patterns. So it processes a sewing pattern that the user uploads to the system. It analyzes the individual shapes, and then it uses an image classification machine learning model to categorize those shapes. Like, is this a pant? Is this a left sleeve? And so on. And then it uses a cloud OCR solution to scan the text from the patterns and extract all the information from the sewing pattern to be uploaded to a database. In this particular example, we also allowed the user to provide corrective feedback. So if a particular image was incorrectly classified, the user would be able to pick the correct answer so that the machine learning model can correct its future predictions. Okay, now we're moving on to NLP. NLP stands for Natural Language Processing. And this entire area has more to do with the processing and generation of text. One of the simple examples is sentiment analysis. So just like image classification classifies what is in an image, sentiment analysis classifies what is the sentiment from a text. So you give it a text and you ask it what is the general sentiment in this text. Is it negative or positive? Or you can also get more detailed than that. For example, sentiment analysis is used to identify cyberbullying online for tools that automate that process. Translation is another AI task where AI has significantly created progress. Of course, translation has been around for a while, but introducing AI to this task has made it a lot more robust and been able to cover a lot more languages much faster than before. Chatbots have also been around for a while, but AI added an entire new aspect to this where you can actually have a conversation with a chatbot and it starts to seem almost human. Whereas before you had to define every single response that you wanted the chatbot to have in lots of different varieties of input that it would recognize. Text summarization is a more a newer task that AI is used for, and this is the case where you provide a text and you ask the AI to generate a summary of that text. My team implemented. Oh, sure. Thanks for the question. So Laura is asking for more details on the difference between sentiment analysis and summarization. It's true that the line can get blurry between those two. So sentiment analysis is usually just categorization of a text. So you have, let's say, 2 to 5 or 10 categories, so a limited number of categories that you could assign to a piece of text. Then you provide a new text, and the AI model says, okay, this text fits in one of these categories, right? At the simplest level, you have two categories and they're positive or negative. So for example, you can take a tweet and ask the AI to say, is this a positive or a negative sentiment in that tweet? And so that's somewhat constrained by those categories. The text summarization, by contrast, there are no predetermined categories for the text summarization. You give the AI a text and you say, summarize this, and it takes that text and makes it shorter. but it's not a single word. It's not a category. It's just a rewriting of the text. And depending on the model, it can be longer or shorter, and so on. Great. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. So we worked on a particular project where we were given a bunch of product reviews and we were asked to perform sentiment analysis based on keywords. So we were given product reviews and specific keywords to look out for. And then we ran sentiment analysis and output a report to indicate what was the sentiment on those particular keywords. So for example, if we were to review, let's say, a chair, right? We had reviews for a chair. One of the keywords may be comfort. Another keyword might be um, how long lasting, right? So resilience, let's say. Another one might be color, right? And so, uh, so uh, the rationale for this was just to summarize what was the sentiment on various dimensions for a product from various reviews. One comment from Stephen: sentiment analysis typically reduces the input to a numeric score, positive, negative, neutral, or yeah, that's true. So ultimately, categorization is equivalent to using a numeric score, right? So depending on how many categories you have, each of those categories can be assigned a number. And as Stephen says, the main purpose is to take the input text and put it in a bucket. All right. Another major AI use case that's especially popular recently is generative AI. So generating images is popular. There's a very popular tool called Midjourney that we'll touch on in a second, where you give it a prompt and it generates an image. Then there's text writing, which is similar, is a superset of the summarization. So when I think of writing text, I think the best example is, again, large language models such as ChatGPT, where you can ask it a variety of questions and you can get various answers, right? So that's really what ChatGPT is doing, is it's writing text. Then we have a generation of audio or music and video generation as well. One big project that was very cool that we worked on was a custom application that connected various AI technologies to transcribe and translate text from audio files, clone a person's voice, and generate videos of custom video avatars speaking in multiple languages. So the result was that the client could use their own product to generate content in multiple languages without having to piece together different services. Now, there are some services that do something similar to what our client wanted, but in this particular case, the cost of those services is very prohibitive, especially when you have a lot of content to generate. So having their own product, their own custom product for this, allows the client to get into generating a lot of content, essentially. All right, so now we're going to dive into the next topic, which is large language models. So large language models are a very advanced form of AI model. They are AI models that are trained on a very large corpus of text. And what this allows them to do is to carry out a conversation and sound like a person that knows a lot of things. And they sound very coherent, almost like a real person, especially in the more recent versions. The first one on the market that had popularity was ChatGPT. It really transformed the AI space, got a lot of attention and users. And then following that came, I think actually Claude was the second one that was released. Claude is an LLM that comes from a company called Anthropic. This is their logo here. And their focus was in particular to allow, to make an LLM that has a very large conversation context. So with ChatGPT, every time you ask one of these tools a question, it also has to look at the context of the conversation in order to understand how to answer your question, right? So if you have a conversation that has 20 different exchanges, if it treated each question as if it was on its own, then its responses would be poorer, right? So it has to look at the entire conversation in order to give the best answers. The main focus of Claude was to have a very large context. And even today, Claude provides the largest context of any of these tools. I think for their best model, the context is something like 200 kilobytes. It's essentially the equivalent of a very large novel. So for every question that you ask, it looks at basically the entire conversation to provide the best answer. Gemini is the offering from Google, and it's also very good. Much better context than ChatGPT. ChatGPT, I would say, has the lowest context, smallest context of all the other two, at least up to this point. They've just released a new model. There's a lot of frequent advancement in this field. And so Gemini sort of meets somewhere in the middle between ChatGPT and Claude.
So we have a question. You're talking about context. Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when the user asks a question, so if it's in the middle of a conversation, let's say with ChatGPT, when the user asks a question, when you start the conversation, the only thing that's in that conversation is that single question that you sent. But as you continue conversing with the model, there are other questions. So the entire conversation contains a number of exchanges. Now, I should mention that context really applies to a single conversation. None of these tools look at context across conversations. So if you start a new chat with any of these tools, the context starts from zero. But within a conversation, there is a point at which one of these tools may say, okay, I'm only going to look at the previous 20 interactions, let's say, as an example, or 10 maybe. And the reason that's done is twofold. One, it's possible that the model itself does not support larger input than that. So it just the way that it was built, it won't support more than that as input. The second aspect is that the larger the conversation, the more computing power it's going to use. And the amount of computing power that these tools use is extremely high. If you run a model like this locally, even with exceptionally good hardware, one question is going to take about a minute to answer. But when you go to ChatGPT, it takes a couple of seconds. So ChatGPT was trying to create a tool that's very accessible to users, and their main focus was not the length of context. So what would happen, for example, just as an example, let's say that you tell ChatGPT for all the following, for the remainder of the conversation, here are some communication rules. Make answers short, keep each sentence no more than 2 lines in length, don't end your responses with a question, etc. Right? Within 3 or 4 interactions, it's likely to forget one of those rules. And that's because of this limited context that it has. Whereas Claude in particular focuses on keeping that context. And so when they built the model, their focus was to accept a very large input, a very large context of the conversation. And what that helps with is the answers are a lot more relevant as you continue interacting with the model, regardless of how many how much detail is in the conversation, because that's the other factor. I mean, one is the number of interactions, the other is how big are each responses. And as you know, most of these, if you've used them, they will generate very large responses. And so it's kind of their own fault that they're going over their context limit and they start forgetting things. Well, with Claude, they focus specifically on making that context very large. Yes, I think they love paragraphs and sometimes even entire chapters. And just to give you an idea, there was a figure that was rumored recently about how much it will cost to train the next generation of large language models. And it's estimated that to really get models that will have an improvement over the current generations, it's possible that a single training will cost $1 billion just to train the large language model once. And that's billion with a B, to be clear.
Wow.
All right. Yeah, it's very expensive to do that. And here we're not talking about gathering all the data and preparing it for training. We're talking just about the computing power that's necessary to train a model like this. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Please, yeah.
If I have like something that I created and then I put it in Chat GPT, not Chat GPT, but in an AI software, which one's the best for like making it exactly like my item, but more detailed?
I see. So the question is how to add more detail to something that you created while keeping your tone of voice and meaning of the work. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. It's like say if I have a picture of my dog or something on the cover of a book, and then I put it in, but then it changes the dog or it changes their eyes instead of just making it exactly the same, but clearer, more precise.
Well, that's a great question. I think we're exactly at the section for that. So the short answer, or I guess the first part of the answer is that it depends what kind of work it is. And you've clarified that we're talking about an image. And for an image, the best tool to use for that is called Midjourney. Midjourney is the most advanced generative AI for images. So you can generate new images in any style you want with any kind of details you want, or you can give it an image and say, add something to this image, and it can do that as well. And in that case, it won't transform the object on the image. It will just take what you gave it and change. Like you could give it the image of the dog and say change the background, for example, or you give it the image of the dog and say make this more colorful.
Okay, so it won't change the actual dog and their eyes and stuff like that. It'll just make it clearer.
Right. Now, if your only purpose is to make the image clearer, then you probably can use something like Photoshop. That will probably be faster to achieve that with less headache. But if you want to make other changes as well, then something like Midjourney is probably good.
Thank you.
We got a follow-up question on your remark about it takes $1 billion to train an LLM. So that's for the model developer, right? What are the implications for a user?
So I suppose for that is that the cost will continue to increase for using the LLM because they have to recoup their costs somehow. And also by training larger and larger LLMs, they will need more computing power just to run them. But that's not directly related to the training cost.
Is there a particular bottleneck that needs to be addressed to reduce this cost?
So it's the computing power. That's the main issue here is the purchase of all the hardware necessary to train this. I've heard that you need something like 100,000. I mean, again, these are all rumors, but I've heard that the numbers are something like 100,000 of the top GPUs, where each one costs like $10,000, and then you have to run those continually. So you need all the power to run those GPUs, and of course, in a data center with cooling and monitoring and so on. So it's
So
the
this is,
compute
instead of
process.
CPU hours, this is CPU millennia.
Right, exactly. That's right.
Okay.
So it's yeah. So you have to use graphical GPUs for this. CPUs don't have the power to train. It would be prohibitive to just use CPUs. You pretty much have to use GPUs. Yeah, exactly. GPU millennia. So it's specialized hardware, which, as a side note, the more powerful GPUs are in shortage because of actual shortage of materials to produce them, and it's not felt as much. Like it's probably hard to feel it, especially for the average user. But we've run into issues where we needed to have really powerful GPUs on a deployment that we made to the Google Cloud platform. And what happens is, unless you are able to reserve a virtual computer in the cloud to use 24/7, the the it will have to be provisioned or prepared whenever you want to use it. And there are times when we go and say, hey, Google Cloud, give us this computer that has a GPU of this type because we want to run our software in it. And the cloud provider will respond, we don't have such an instance available. So Google runs out of instances that have certain types of hardware.
Interesting.
So that's why when you're training an LLM, you actually have to buy them so that they're available to you constantly, and then put them all in a data center. Like you have to have you have to have an entire building just for doing this training. All right, so let me dive very briefly in some tools. We've talked about ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. These are LLM offerings from various companies: OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic. Midjourney is a company whose sole purpose is to makes this product called Midjourney, which generates images, and they were the first, I would say, on the market, and they're still the most advanced. Dolly is another solution. This is created by OpenAI, and it's currently being used by Copilot. So the Microsoft Copilot, which is also an LLM, but it's, I would say, much less advanced than these other three. But it uses Dolly to generate images. And I am not sure about this, but I think Gemini might also be using Dolly to generate images. Dolly is nowhere close to as advanced as Midjourney. Read AI is a tool that helps with recording and summarizing meetings, and I find this very useful. Whenever I can, I add my Read AI to Zoom meetings or Google meetings, and then records the meetings and then summarizes it. And it's very good at summarizing. It extracts highlights, and it even extracts action items from a meeting. 11 Labs is one of the most advanced, probably the most advanced voice generation tools. So this is text, it's also called text to speech. So you give it a text and it generates the voice, and you tell it what kind of voice you want it to have, what language. It's no problem for 11 Labs. It sounds very realistic. Sync Labs is a tool that's used for lip syncing. So if you have a video of somebody, a sample video of somebody, and then you have a voice that speaks some text, you can combine them together to generate a video where the original video is lip synced to the voice. Runway is a tool that generates videos. This is also fairly advanced. There's another tool that came out more recently called Dream Machine. Videos are still a bit hard to generate for AI. Like you'll have a few seconds of a video, and then like the humans, if it's a human in the video, will start to morph into something that's hard to understand. So there's still some work to be done there. Suno is a tool that's used to generate music. It can generate instrumental music, but it can also generate voice, so vocals. Um, it also generates lyrics if you want, but what I found most useful is to combine it with something like Gemini. So I have Gemini generate the lyrics, and then I plug them into Suno, tell it what kind of song to generate, and it generates the song with the vocals. GitHub Copilot is something I find indispensable as a developer. So this tool helps you by suggesting code, right? So as you're writing code, it suggests code. Now, of course, I don't just take the code from GitHub Copilot and use it, just accept it, but it is making it faster because, for example, if I start to type something and it knows what I want to type, it suggests the rest of the line, and then I can just hit tab and it completes the line and I'm done with that line. If you have a lot of functions to write, for example, in development, if you name your function correctly, like you name your function exactly what the function is supposed to do, GitHub Copilot will infer what the code for that function should be based on the rest of your code. So super, super helpful. And then finally, Gamma, which is a tool that's used to generate presentations. And I'm going to demo that in the next section. All right. Now, let's move on to prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is programming with natural language. I think that's the best way to define prompt engineering. So it's very precise conversation. So when you open ChatGPT and you ask it a question, you're using prompt engineering. Even if your prompt is, how are you feeling today? You know, you're asking the AI, how are you doing today? And it's probably going to respond something like, yeah, I'm doing great. How are you doing? What's on your mind? Whatever. The prompt that you give it is the study of the prompt is called prompt engineering. So the more precise your prompt is, the better results you will get, and you can get very precise with the prompt when you're talking to any tool that uses prompts, from ChatGPT to image generation, video generation, all those tools. When you provide a better prompt or a more precise prompt, you get better results. So this is really an interdisciplinary approach because it uses elements from linguistics and computer science, but also psychology. And the reason psychology is important seems kind of strange to talk about that when you're interacting with AI, but AI is trained on text that people have created. So that text, which people have created, has elements of psychology, and therefore that impacts the way you use prompt engineering to talk to an AI that was trained on that text. So the more we use AI tools, the more prompt engineering will become prevalent. And I think that we will get to the point where there's going to be a very large class of computer programmers who will not use actual code; they will just use prompt engineering. And that class of computer programmers will be somewhere between people that have a technical background and people who don't have a technical background. People like designers, for example. I think that's very realistic. I think that's good. It will enable people as a whole to use these tools to make their work easier. And I should say that there's been a significant impact to the job market because of AI tools, and that's because there are a lot of bosses, or I shouldn't speak to who made those decisions, but there are a lot of companies. I should say there are a lot of companies that reach the decision that people are not as productive as just using an AI tool. The caveat for that is that AI is nowhere close to producing results that are as good quality as what people write. They look very close to that, but there are significant errors when generating a large of code. That's why AI right now is not really used to generate legal documents or um, It's not used to generate medical advice or financial advice. Sure, it can give you some ideas, but you still have to pass it through the filter of a human lens to confirm that. Okay, and so the main key with prompt engineering is that the more clear and relevant your prompt can be, the more specific, the better results you will get to. So we're going to go into some examples now. Okay, so I'm going to use Gemini for this one. So this prompt is made up of 3 sentences. I've split them up like this because I want to illustrate how specific you can get. And this is still pretty mild, I would say. So read this text and summarize the main items in a bulleted list. So here I'm telling it what to do and what is the output that I want to get. So I'm being very specific about the output. I'm also stating that each bullet should be only 1 sentence. Now, I'm not saying anything about the length of the sentence, but the response will not be, will still be grammatical. So I can expect that it'll be reasonably short. And then convert technical language to more accessible vocabulary. Okay, so this is my text. And I'm going to go here to Gemini. I'm going to paste this prompt. I'm sorry, this is my prompt. The text is forthcoming. I'm going to go to the Wikipedia large language model case, and I will take this paragraph here from history. So I'm going to paste this in here. And as you can see, there's a pretty, it's readable, but it's certainly pretty technical. So what we're looking for is a response that is not quite as technical as that. Okay, and as you can see, the response is much easier to read. Of course, there's still items that are not explained. For example, if you don't know what the transformer architecture is, you just know it's something introduced by Google. So for a complete layperson that has no technical background, there may still be things to answer here, but it's much more accessible than the previous text that we offered. This is a very basic use case. I'm sure you've used this type of prompt before, but I just wanted to illustrate kind of a base example of what Gemini. By the way, when I say Gemini, you can use ChatGPT or Claude instead. It's interchangeable.
We had one question. As a part of the prompt, can you specify the reading level the sentences should be produced at?
Yes. So you can decide what the reading level is. Now, instead of sending the same prompt, which you could, so you could use the same prompt and just add that, I will say over here, I will add the part of the prompt here. So I'll make it interactive. But I just want to be clear that you could include what I'm about to write in the original prompt and it will have the same or similar effect. Make the response readable at a 5th grade level. Now let's try less than that because 5th grade is 3rd grade level. So language models use math to learn and understand words. Then special computer programs called neural networks made language models even better. As you can see, if you can compare, let me zoom in a bit because this might be a bit small. I just realized that. Sorry about that. So hopefully this is a bit easier to read. And hopefully you can see the difference in language between the two.
Yeah.
Right. One thing that I've done, so I like learning new languages. And so one thing that I've done to help me learn some Japanese vocabulary is to ask it I was actually working with Gemini. I asked it to give me a sample conversation at a first grade level, and it gave me a very short conversation at a first grade level in Japanese with pronunciation guide and translation. Okay, so let's go to the next example. Okay, so I think this is good, but I want to show you a different one. You can use the exact same prompt if you want, but I want to show you a different prompt that I think may be more interesting. We'll come back to Gamma. This is a plan for generating a prompt to generate a business plan. Okay, so as an example, I'm just using revolutionary apple slicers. Of course, you would input your own product, give as much detail as you want for that. And for this example, I'm going to use Claude. I like Claude a lot. This is the tool that I use the most. The downside with Claude, oh, sorry, I think I read something in the chat asking about how training a large language model accounts for new information that comes from the web. So I just want to briefly come back to that to address that. So nowadays, the way large language models work is that after training, they automatically go and search new information on the web. So you can think about it as if when you ask them a question, they automatically add to their context, right? So you ask them a question about something and then they go, oh, I don't know enough details about this. Let me get the most recent information about this topic. So then they go to the web, they search, and they come back with uh, with whatever articles they find, and they include that in the context when they answer your question. So they automatically do this web search to amplify their knowledge. Well, at least ChatGPT and Gemini do that. Claude doesn't. Claude doesn't have internet search. It just has the knowledge that you give it, or sorry, that it was trained on, and then whatever knowledge you give it. Okay. So I'm gonna ask it on this, and I realize here I just want to make one additional. Well, actually, no. Let me generate this, and then I will show you something that's also special about Claude that they added for the past couple of months. Okay. Now this is the outline. Okay, so it's got executive summary, company description, product description, so on, with what each section should include. But of course, and with links to samples or other resources that can talk about business plans. But of course, you can also ask it to generate um, actual text for your business plan. By the way, just as I was talking about how it doesn't have internet search, there's a notification right here at the bottom that says, does that have internet access? So that's just to let you know. Okay. Now, Claude has added a new feature which they call artifacts. Artifacts are like documents that are related to a conversation, but they appear on the side. So you can have your main conversation on the left side and your artifacts on the right side. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. Put this in an artifact. Okay, this is what it looks like. I found this invaluable. This is so far, that's the only one of the products that has this artifact feature. And they just give it a fancy name, but it's really just a document, right? So you can go out of the artifact, you see here the list of them, and every time you make changes to it, it'll keep versions. So for example, I will say, you could say this, generate an executive summary draft for this business, but you could also say add, or yeah, or replace executive summary with a generated draft for this business. And the reason I'm wording it this way is I wanted to give me a new version of the artifact, right? So, and as you can see, it generated this executive summary here, and it left the rest of the sections the same. And also here at the bottom, there's you can go back and forth between versions. So version 1 has just the executive summary, and then you can go to version 2, which has the generated executive summary.
So we got a question about Perplexity, which actually provides footnotes, which is different from this artifacts. But which LLM does Perplexity build on? Do you know?
I actually don't know that, but let's ask Gemini. Ah, okay. So it's stating that that's not that it doesn't publish. But
An
yeah,
audience member suggested it's Claude.
yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Absolutely. I mean, I think Claude is I think Claude is the best option except for its lack of search. Oh, I see. Okay, there's a post at Anthropic AI that Perplexity uses Claude. Perfect. Well, that explains it. That makes sense. Okay, so I want to touch on a couple more things before we wrap up. I want to give you an example of generating entire presentations with this. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there's a tool called Gamma. And with Gamma, you can generate a presentation. Okay, and you can pick a variety of things. You can even generate a document or a website. You have a bunch of options over here, different languages. Okay, and I am asking it for business development strategy for an AI software consultancy focusing on hyper personalization and what to include in that. So we're going to generate an outline. This is the outline. Of course, you can change these around, add a card, and so on. And now we're going to continue. And now I get to pick the theme. So I personally, I mean, you can pick any theme. I think we can do something like this, maybe. Oh wait, no. Let's stick with this. I'm not a huge fan of serif fonts. Okay, and now we're going to generate. So this generates an entire presentation around the topic that I asked it for, and of course it makes it very easy to get started with this type of work.
Wow.
Yeah, gamma.app.
So if there was too much marketing content before, now it'll be, instead of a sewer pipe full, it'll be like an entire river.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there's so many things that are done. For example, I think that there are people who use Suno to generate, and there's another one called Udio, another tool called Udio, which is also used to generate music. There are people who generate music and then upload it to Spotify because it's effectively their work. So there are artists that are springing up all over the place with AI generated music. It's, it can be competent. Of course, it could also be bad if you're not doing proper quality assurance. Okay, now let's see. So we can also do image generation. So this is, I'm just asking Gemini for a LinkedIn post for the start of fall season and a draft. So both an image and a draft of a post. Now, Claude, for example, doesn't generate images yet. So, upsides and downsides. And while we're waiting for it to generate, I can show you the previous one it generated, or one of the previous ones that I thought was very fitting for this. And it's pretty good quality. I mean, you can go into details about what you wanted to generate. Here I left it kind of open-ended, so we'll see. I don't know. Oh, I see. So it thought that I was asking for an image of me that represents this occasion. So, which is pretty strange because I yeah, I didn't say specifically a person, but it probably, what happens is sometimes you give it a prompt and it interprets it in one way, but sometimes it interprets it in a different way. So this is the image generator, which I think is very competent overall, but you can also vary things a bit. Let me try. Oh, I'm sorry. There's something I just noticed. Give me 1 second. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, I don't know how I did this. Let me try again. This is okay. Okay, cool. So let me go back here. I realized that I was trying to add this also add a draft for the post itself. And here I'm going to change. So this exact prompt has worked before, but as I said, sometimes they update the model and that changes how things work. So that's also why prompt engineering is sort of a live discipline. Collects technology and AI technology and a professional environment. So let's see if we get lucky this time. Thank you. So I am okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Gemini. But as I said, with using the same prompt, this is what I previously got as an image. But today, Gemini seems to be very particular about generating images. Okay, so we're running short on time. How much time do you think I still? Okay.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Do you want to talk about hallucinations and take some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So nowadays, it's actually harder to get it to hallucinate, but yes, hallucinations is an issue. And one example that I had was that I asked it about this phrase from a movie called The Day After Tomorrow, but I accidentally quoted the phrase as Klaju Barata Nikto instead of Klatu Barata Nikto. And what it told me is that this is a Malay phrase that means faster than the speed of light and is used colloquially to mean, the pizza will get here, Klatu Barata Nikto. This was incorrect, of course. But in that particular case, all I did was to ask it, hey, are you sure that that's what it means? And then it immediately corrected itself and said, no, actually, that's not correct. Sorry about that. It actually is a phrase from this movie. All that to say is that as you can see down here at the bottom, Gemini may display inaccurate info including about people, so double check its responses. You can see also here, Claude can make mistakes. Please double check responses. I believe ChatGPT has a similar disclaimer. So that's something to keep in mind. That's going to happen, and it's probably going to keep happening for a while. It's very hard to get rid of hallucinations completely, even though, as I said, now it's getting a lot easier to make it better. Essentially, all of its answers are hallucinations. It can't really tell because the main issue is that it doesn't know it doesn't know everything about people. So I'm seeing a question about obvious hallucinations. That's true. You won't necessarily see it. I think one way to do it is, can you give me top 5 news in the AI industry last week? So I think that has the chances to produce something. I have no idea if these are true or not, but it's entirely possible that that some of these are false. So we can try to search for it. No, that was actually true, but it was in June, so this wasn't last week.
We did have a question that goes back to your definition of prompt engineering. And the question is, given that prompt engineering involves crafting precise instructions to guide the behavior of an LLM, how much influence do you really have over the model's outputs? I noticed when you when the one was asking about um, improving a image, you said, well, you might think about Photoshop instead. So when are you better served to use a prompt, and when are you better served to use more of an editor?
So I think it depends on the task, and there's no really easy answer to that. I think that your allegiance should only be to your goals, not to any tool in particular. So if there's a tool that will resolve things simply by, opening the image and then you apply a sharpening filter on top of it, use that. If you need to generate an image, for example, and you can quickly do it with Gemini, use that. So that's really the only goal that makes sense to have. These tools are at your service, not the other way around. So uh, depending on the task, different tools might be most appropriate. Now, in terms of the limits of what can be achieved, there are limits, and each model will have different limits. I think, for example, here's a limit. It would be very hard to create a prompt that will completely prevent hallucinations. So that's something to think about. Now, I just want to move over here. We don't have time to go through the AI thought leaders, so I'm just going to go over here and let you know this is my contact information. And if you would like to reach out, please do. I'm very easy to reach on LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect with you. If you have any other questions, it'll be my pleasure to have a talk with you.
I've put your email in the chat too. If people want to stick and ask questions, we can extend for another few minutes if we didn't cover it. Otherwise, if you've got to be somewhere else, we will make a copy of the deck available and a copy of this video.
Sounds good. Yeah, I have a few minutes to stick around for some other questions.
I think we covered all the questions people put in chat. Is there more? The video will be posted. We'll post a link to where the video is posted in the chat for this meetup, right? Joseph, could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by biggest ask?
Oh, I think I may understand that question. What is the biggest ask by clients for AI work? So if I understand correctly, the question is, right, exactly. What kind of services do clients
It's not the largest project. It's the most frequent.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think that most commonly, so there are two major use cases. One, the general one is to create an MVP of a product. That's the most frequent one that we in our team deal with. So they will come to us with an idea for a product, like, hey, I want to build an educational assistant with an AI component. That's just an example. And then we would build that MVP for them. So just kind of a back to front, full stack deployed tool that they can then turn and read. That they can then turn and use for requesting investment. The other more specific use case is recently a type of sort of hyper customization, I would say, of marketing materials. So we have a number of clients that are asking for virtual avatars. And there are tools that provide virtual avatars, but they want those included in their own product or website.
A question, can you just tell the LLM not to hallucinate, as Apple appears to be doing?
Right. So you can use those, but I don't believe they are 100% proof, foolproof. I think those are hard to do. Like one measure to prevent hallucinations in practice is to ask a question. So in the back end, right? Like let's say you have a product that passes prompts to Gemini. So in your code, you will pass a prompt to Gemini, and then after it gives you the response, you will ask it, are you sure that's the right answer? Or something along those lines. And then you will essentially prompt it to double check its responses. So I think this type of measure is helpful. I just don't think you can guarantee no hallucinations, no matter how much you tell it. Ultimately, hallucinations have a chance to happen.
Question on call center chatbots, why we're not seeing more use in call centers.
I think it's becoming more and more popular nowadays. One of the major issues with chatbots in call centers, or two, I would say, two major issues. One is that the voice has to sound realistic and generated in real time, which is a challenge. And the second is that you have to detect interruptions in conversation from the other end, which is quite challenging to do, right? So when somebody is asking a question, the tool has to detect where the end of the question is. And so the ChatGPT app that you can download on your phone is actually pretty good at that. You can talk to it via voice command. It's pretty good at detecting the end of the sentence, the pause.
So we got a question on hallucinations preventing chatbot use.
Yes, I think that hallucinations are an impediment. That said, I think there are still companies that just allow that to happen. So I've used chatbots that support chatbots, and you ask them questions and they give you incorrect answers. Like that happens for sure.
For me, the problem is it seems like it's intrinsic to the, what are we going to call it, algorithm or method. So if you were to do a Google search or a Bing search, and you said, I'm looking for this phrase, and then you look at the document, that document doesn't occur, that phrase doesn't occur in the document, that's a bug, because that's intrinsic to the algorithm. You understand how that's supposed to work. But the chatbot is doing something very different. And so you don't have the traceability between input and answer that you do with other kinds of text analytic tools.
Right, and I think there's another element, and this is more of a hypothesis, so it's totally anecdotal here, but I believe that people in general have a hesitation to say I don't know, right? So I believe this hesitation is encoded via volumes and volumes of our written text. So it is encoded in our shared knowledge, right? Uh, and so when you train an AI with that shared knowledge, where again this is a hypothesis, right? That people might be reluctant to say I don't know, then that AI may encode the fact that it's preferable to come up with an answer than to just outright say I don't know.
That's very interesting.
Yep.
Well, I think we've covered most of the landscape. I want to thank Alex again for a very good briefing, and we're going to break here. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.